Some of my fondest memories are when I was young, spending time with my grandma in the kitchen and just watching her as she cooked. She wasn't such a gourmet cook, but she taught me how to have fun with food and to enjoy the tastes and flavors. Now I'm a grandma, and I love spending time with my grandchildren in the kitchen. Right now, I'd like to spend some time with you in the real grandma's kitchen. Let's get started. Today we're making lasagna. I need to cut up some onion. This is just a yellow onion. And I'm going to cut it into diced pieces, and we'll fry that. I start with the onion because it takes the longest to cook, to get it really translucent the way I'd like to have it cut and cooked. So a lot of people don't like to cut onions because they make your eyes water. I found that if you take the onion, first of all, if you get it cut quickly enough, it doesn't have time to affect you. But otherwise, if you rinse it with cold water, that seems to cut down on some of the odors that would normally make your eyes water terribly. So I have a little bit of olive oil in the bottom of the pan, but not too much because we don't really want to have a greasy lasagna. Put the onions in, everything's in, spread them around a little bit, and then we'll go back and get the garlic ready. With lasagna, I like to have at least 4 garlics in there because with lasagna, you want to have lots of good flavor. Crunch your garlic, and then we're going to just peel it. By crunching it like that, it helps the peel to come off a little bit easier so that you aren't eating garlic peel in your food. And then we'll chop it up and add it to the onions. You hear those onions sizzle in the background? It does take a little bit of time. Once it comes up to a high heat, I'm going to turn it down so it doesn't burn. And then we'll add the chopped garlic to the onion. Here you go. Take a little spatula and stir it around a little bit. And then I'm going to turn it down so that the onion and garlic will just have a chance to saute and the onion becomes translucent. That makes the onion a little bit sweeter for your flavor. Now that we have the onion and garlic going, we want to finish chopping up our mushrooms so that they can pre-cook before we add the meat. The mushrooms add just a little bit of an earthy flavor to the lasagna, adding texture, not just the meat texture, but with the mushrooms, it's very delightful and it's just more appealing to your mouth. Add these to the already cut mushrooms. We're going to add the mushrooms to the onion and garlic, and then we will start preparing the meat. If you notice, the onion is starting to become a little bit translucent here. And it's right to have that little bit of brownness on it. That tells you that the flavor is going to be maximized. So I'm going to add in my mushrooms. Stir them in. Now today we're making plenty of sauce for not just this casserole, but for having a little extra in your freezer for a quick dinner. For the meat, I like to have both regular ground beef as well as Italian sausage. I prefer the mild. So let's start out preparing that. Let's take 3 of these casings here and just slice down the middle. And we'll dump that in the pan with the mushrooms, onion, and garlic. And then I buy the large package just to be economical, and I'm only going to use half of it for this sauce. The other half we'll wrap real carefully and place that in the freezer. The mushrooms are just about ready, so it's time to add the meat. You notice that you don't have a special way you have to do this. You just want to break it apart a little bit. Add the Italian sausage. So this recipe calls for about 1.5 pounds of ground beef and a 1/2 pound of the Italian sausage. And again, just mix it up. And we'll let that just start to cook down. My favorite is a good pinch of salt. This time I'm using kosher salt. Some pepper. And some Italian herbs that are dried. Oregano and basil for sure. You could add rosemary if you wish. My kids just don't like rosemary, so I don't put it in my food. And then we'll want to stir that so that everything continues getting mixed and we let the meat break down a little bit. Kind of nice to see how things incorporate together. You can see that the mushrooms are starting to brown beautifully. While a whole onion sounded like a lot, you can see that it really isn't when you put it in the grand perspective of everything. And I'm smelling it because I cook by smell a lot, and I could just smell my seasonings and a little bit of the garlic, a little bit of the onion. So I know that it's just perfect for seasoning. I wish you could smell it. I smell all the herbs and the garlic and the mushrooms. It's going to just be a delicious lasagna. Now, while the sauce is kind of simmering and getting ready for me to add the tomatoes, this would be a perfect time if I wanted to cut up my lettuce and vegetables for a salad. Lasagna and a nice green salad is a perfect complete dinner for anyone. Let's go ahead and check on the meat. Well, it looks perfect. There's very little pieces that are still at all pink on the meat. Most of it's cooked all the way through. I'm going to break those larger pieces up a little bit more. And it's time to add the sauces. I love putting in some olives in my lasagna. And I put in the water as well as the olives themselves. It adds yet another depth of flavor to the lasagna sauce. We add a 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. A 14-ounce can of diced tomatoes. And I'm going to add another little surprise today. I have the sun-dried tomato halves with Italian herbs. And I'm going to add just a few of those just for some extra fun flavor. It's going to add a totally new depth of richness to our sauce. We'll stir it. And then we're going to just let it sit and simmer. So let's turn it down even a little bit further. Our sauce is cooking. Now let's get the pasta ready. You want to add plenty of salt to a large kettle of water. Pasta does best if it is surrounded by extra water. It needs that space to really evenly cook. And then we want to add the long lasagna noodles to our water, our salted water. It takes about 12 minutes for these to cook. You want to have them a little al dente so that when you add everything together, it finishes cooking in the oven. One of the things that you'll notice on the lasagna pasta is, remember how it was sticking out? As it starts to cook, it gets softer and you can fit the whole pasta noodle inside the liquid. And that's really important so that it all gets cooked and it doesn't stick on the bottom. My grandma used to put a little oil in the water and that would keep it from boiling over, she said. but that's just a wives' tale. I'm going to stir my meat again. Let's make sure it doesn't stick on the bottom. We don't want burnt sauce. Look how it's cooking down and condensing. This is a rich, delicious pasta sauce. The lasagna noodles have cooked for about 12 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and take them out, and we'll get ready to assemble our lasagna. You want to be careful not to break a lot of them, because it's nice to have them to weave in your lasagna pan. So I'm just gently lifting them out of my pot and putting them in the strainer. In the meantime, let's turn off the sauce. We'll get them a little bit cooler so that we can actually handle them when we're putting everything together. Great. Okay. And let me bring the sauce over and we'll put it together. But before we put it together, let's go ahead and preheat the oven. About 350, we're going to bake it for 30 to 45 minutes. Lasagna gets down to a personal flavor. Everybody likes theirs a little bit differently. My personal preference is I love to use cottage cheese as well as either a mixture of Monterey Jack and cheddar or some real mozzarella cheese. The Monterey Jack and cheddar actually gives you more flavor, and so that's what we're going to make today. I'm going to start out and put some sauce down on the bottom of the pan so that we have a base of flavor, and just kind of spread it out. And then we're going to make layers to give us that typical lasagna weave that we're all so used to. So take your pasta, put down 3 rows, take some meat, put it over those 3 rows, and you want to make it a little bit even because otherwise someone will complain that they didn't have as much as someone else. And of course at the end it never is quite long enough for a lasagna to go to the end of the pan. So just take one of your noodles and cut it so that you have a nice long piece. You would take some cottage cheese, a couple of really good spoonfuls, and with your fingers just kind of spread it along so that it's dotted along the lasagna. It's a little bit messy, but things that are messy usually taste better. And then I'm going to top that with a layer of cheese, just sprinkling it along the top. And there's your first layer. So we're going to repeat this to have our layers. The second time I do a layer, I'm going to actually start the noodle down here. Remember, at the end, we have to have that one piece that helps accommodate. And on the second layer, I always like to do a weave. So I'm going to go under here, over here, under here, and tuck it. And we'll just repeat that throughout this layer. Over, under, over, and tuck it. Under, over, under, and tuck it. And this one's a little bit narrow, so let's cut off the very edge And we'll go over, under, and over. Doesn't that look pretty? Put another layer of meat. Another layer of cottage cheese, just sprinkled. I've seen a lot of recipes that call for ricotta cheese. Ricotta has a sharper flavor than the cottage cheese. The cottage cheese adds on another layer of creaminess to this lasagna. And so my family really definitely prefers the cottage cheese. It will melt right into everything. And it's absolutely delicious to have to enhance the flavors of everything. It brings it out. And then I also, again, remember you want to mix it up just a little bit. If you have a piece of meat or two that's just too big, just crush it with your fingers. Remember, it's a little hot though, so you don't want to burn yourself. And then we're going to put a nice layer of cheese on top of the cottage cheese and meat. Just kind of spread it out so that everybody gets some cheese. And this will melt and just be kind of stringy when you take a bite. It's so delicious, it just melts in your mouth. And we're going to put one more layer of weaved pasta. And last but not least, we're going to sprinkle some cheese over the very top, and then it's ready to go in the oven. I'm going to set my timer for 35 minutes so I can check on it. Normally it takes 45 minutes, but you can't undo burnt. The timer's gone off. Let's check and see how it looks. Oh, that is perfect. Look at this. The cheese is starting to brown, but it's not burnt. Everything looks juicy and delicious. Let's take it out and try some. Here it is, our lasagna that we've made together. It looks so delicious. Whenever it's done, you know, because the pasta is done, but it's not burnt. The cheese is nicely browned and melted. And if you look at the sides, you can see that everything is bubbling. That looks delicious, doesn't it? And it tastes better than it smells. All the savoriness of the herbs and spices, garlic, the sausage and the meat just blend together to make such a delightful bite. Next time you're ready for a nice Italian lasagna dinner, try this recipe. Tell everybody you got this at the Real Grandma's Kitchen. See you next time.